Hi, and welcome to this next module in the Flutter course. So far, we have done the basics of Flutter. We have learned about the different widgets that are available in it, the layout widgets, some of the basics as in scaffold, text. Now we want to go a bit advanced and we want to look at making API or networking calls in Flutter. How would we do that basically is in this module, we'll try to build an application that would get a random code and display it in our app. So here's what we learn while working on this project. First of all, we learn about navigation, how you can move from one screen to other in Flutter. Next, we'll learn about these HTTP calls in Flutter. How can you make one? Get data from the internet. After you get the data, so basically an API call would be something to an external service which would return some data. So you'll make an API call, you'll get some data of the internet and it would come back to your application. Now this data would come as JSON in the JSON format. So we want to also see, like, after we get this data, we want to see like how can we parse the JSON in Flutter and use the data that we get to update the UI. We'll also build a beautiful application, which means we'll be working with more UI components and try to make it better. Now, this would all be covered in this module and it will prepare you for working on real world projects where you have to get data off the internet, show it in your app, and it can also go further as to working with backends later on, where you can make a request, send data to backend, and also get it and show it in your application. This is all we will cover in this module. Let me just quickly give you an overview of the API we would be using. So it's a free API, Go Codes API, which basically returns a random code. If I'll hit enter, like, you can see what the response looks like. It gives out the status of the response, and it also gives out the message if it's successful API call, and it displays quote. Since we have set this count to 1, we only get one quote, which is here inside the text, and you'll also see the author of it. So we'll try to get it inside our Flutter application and try to show this code. Now I wouldn't go into the basics of API or how to make this. I wouldn't go into like how this API works, but if you will just copy this particular URL and try to run it on your application, you would get a more like a string structure. I can quickly show you by turning off this extension that I have. So if I'll now make this API call, you'll get a response something like this, which should have a code here with the text key and a status. Now we'll talk more about it as we go along with the tutorial, but once this is done, like once you understand how networking calls are made, how you can get data, once you understand navigation, you would be able to build bigger projects where you have to interact with APIs, try to get data off the internet, and possibly work as an intern at a company. And you would also understand the UI elements, how to update them. So let's get started with this particular tutorial.